All right. So tonight is our introduction to calligraphy, our modern calligraphy. We're going to go over our packet first, go over most of the pages, work on a few side projects, and then we'll come back and finish, go over the last couple of pages that has some tips and supply recommendations. Always feel free to have tracing paper to preserve any paper that you want to reuse over time. And then I'm just going to go over the words of encouragement to start. Anyone can hand letter as long as you're willing to practice. Think of lettering as drawing shapes. Lettering is not cursive. While learning this new skill, go slow and controlled. Don't worry about shakiness. In the beginning, focus on each stroke and understand how each letter form is created. So once you go through the whole packet and you understand the basics, come back and read this and you'll understand it a little bit better. And then on this page 2, I'm just going to go right into the strokes. For those of you who are coming back, this is our warm-up, but also those of you that are joining us for the first time. I want to introduce you to the basics just right off the bat, just so as we're going through the rest of the packet, it kind of makes a little bit more sense. Okay, we have our upstroke from the bottom up using the tip of your pen. Bottom up, light pressure, tip of your pen. Downstroke, top to bottom, full pressure. Top to bottom, push down, full pressure down. Overturn stroke, starts at the bottom left, light pressure, over, and apply pressure once you're over. So again, light pressure, over, and don't apply pressure until you go over the top. Underturn stroke, starts with heavy pressure, release right before the bottom, back up with light pressure. Compound curve, so it's overturn combined into a underturn. Light pressure, over, full pressure, release before the bottom, light up. So light, hard, and light pressure. You have your oval. I always like to start off down the side with light pressure, over like an overturn, full pressure, back up, and connect where you started. I like to start off to the side so it gives it a more rounded look at the top. Reverse oval, same thing, go backwards, start a little off down to the side with light pressure, over, backwards, heavy, release before the bottom, and connect where you started. Ascending loop starts here in the center with light pressure, reverse, back down where you started with heavy pressure. Descending loop starts from the top with full pressure, release before the bottom, and stop halfway down at the downstroke. Halfway. Okay, hopefully that warmed up your hand a little bit. I'll move on to page 3. Okay, so moving into the basic strokes, basic core strokes. So calligraphy is broken down into a series of strokes. And when you first start, you want to focus on these strokes. Here on the top, rows and rows of upstrokes, rows and rows of downstrokes, and rows of overturned strokes. Just fill up lines of paper. And once you get that down, move on to alphabets. And as long as you continue to work on your muscle memory, you'll learn to form words once you figure out where the thick and thin strokes are. For this page, I like to mention it, use it as a reference sheet. Anytime you're gonna sit down and practice your lettering for the day, pull this out and then just use this as a reference guide. A little drill we can do with this second section. I'm gonna use my tracing paper here. You can do it now, or let me show you a different way. So there's two ways that you can use this second section as a, what can I call it? Like a study guide. Work tracing each stroke and lift your hand completely. Move on to the next color, the next stroke. Roll your hand back and come back and do the next stroke. So every time the color changes, I want you to lift your pen. And I say roll your hand back, so you forcefully lift your pen. And the purpose of this is that anytime you're doing words, quotes, practice, drills, anything you're doing, you always want to lift your pen in between every stroke. So that's the purpose of this section. If another way, instead of rolling your wrist back, grab two colors of brush pens, and just like it has here, gray and black, switch your pen color. And again, this is just teaching your muscle memory how to lift your pen in between every stroke. In the beginning, I always wanted to jump just right into words, right into strokes, and I would get frustrated with myself, and I would notice that words were not looking and forming as if I were seeing them online. And I can't stress enough how just doing your basic strokes and doing your ABCs have helped getting to that level where you can form words and quotes seamlessly. Moving on to the alphabet breakdown. This also is another, you could say drill, or if you need help with a specific letter, use this as your reference guide and figure out what strokes go into what letter. Let me see. I'm gonna go over a couple of them. I would say these are my more difficult strokes that I had when I was beginning. Right off the bat, looks easy, seems easy. The letter M and N, I couldn't get it in the beginning. It was just too difficult for me. I don't know why. It just, I guess I always wanted to just write it fast. So this is an example of going slow and controlled and lifting your pen. So working over the letter M, you have 3 strokes: overturn, overturn, and compound curve. And when you draw the strokes, you want to slightly overlap them. Just barely touching each other to form the letter. And like I was mentioning earlier, I believe when I started, I just wanted to do it fast and expected to see the thick and thin, but it never would look this way until I came across another tutorial that broke it down for me this way. And after that, it just completely changed my M and N. So again, just practice each stroke, and then you can move on to connecting them by slightly touching each stroke. Another two that I would consider more of a easy way of learning, R and S is better to be taught as one stroke. So here, of course, I broke it down into 2 strokes because I want to show how many strokes go into these letters. But over time, as you practice more, you're gonna see, for example, R and S might be a little bit easy to draw as a single stroke. So for example, I can draw 2 strokes here, but as I get better, I'm never gonna lift my pen and teach myself how to draw it as a single stroke. So same thing for S. Broken down, I see it in 3 strokes. But as I get better, I'm going to teach myself how to never lift my pen. So yeah, calligraphy, modern calligraphies can be kind of tricky, but what's tricky is the style, making your own style. So you can watch hundreds and hundreds of videos, but until you start creating your own style, that's when you start working on shortcuts. But again, I can't stress enough strokes. Just work on strokes, work on your alphabet, and then you start forming your own style of writing. Does anybody want to give me any alphabet they would like for me to break down? I can work on the X and the Z. Let's see. The X is another good one to learn. It's an extended compound curve. So here's your compound curve here. And the X is more extended, expanded. Just open it up instead of going straight up and down. And then your cross stroke, I recommend going from the bottom up. If you go from the top down, you're going to end up with a thick downstroke. The letter Z. First stroke is more of a overturn, but at a slant. So slanting an overturn combined with the descending loop. Well, actually the descending loop is more open as well. So instead of going straight down like the basic stroke, so a slanted overturn with the curved descending loop. Letter K is another one that these letters, there's different variations because again, it depends on your style. So as you continue to study, you're gonna notice that there's different ways to write pretty much all these letters. With the K, this stroke here, it really doesn't even have a name. The way I like to do it is just with the line going into a half compound curve, I would say. So here's ascending loop. The reason I like to do a line is so that it doesn't interfere with the ascending loop. But again, as you create your own style, you can make your ascending loop smaller so that you can have more room for the loop on top of the K. So that's a letter you can play with. Another one similar to this where you kind of make your own style would be the letter O. Here it just demonstrates a super simple letter O. But if I do have a letter O today, you're gonna see I don't even write it like that anymore. My O's, I completely loop it all the way through. Different, just all different. That's the beauty of modern calligraphy. It's just making it your own, putting your own touch. And honestly, it's whatever, you know, looks good to your own eyes. But again, this is just super basic reference guide. Look over it whenever you're doing your lettering for the day. Do I have any questions before I move on to the next page? No. Okay. Let me just check the chat. Okay, that looks good. All right. Okay, so after learning our basic strokes and our alphabet and kind of understanding the breakdown of the alphabet, some brush lettering basics that I would like for you to just remember every time you're going to, anytime you're going to do calligraphy. Let me change colors here. So every time your pen goes towards your body, it's always going to be a downstroke. Your downstrokes are always going to be on the side, full pressure, just depending on what pen you're using. Crayola is another good starter. Grabbing a Crayola marker, pushing hard on the side. Downstrokes towards your body, full pressure. And anytime the pen is going in an upwards motion, know that it's going to be the tip of the pen and it's going to always be light pressure. So for example, with an oval, I'm going up here, that's light, but I'm going down towards my body here, it's heavy pressure. And then when I release and go back up, it's light pressure. So every time my pen went up, I had light pressure. Every time I went down, I had heavy pressure. Number 2, you want to always angle your pen at a 45-degree angle. And actually number 2 and number 4 go hand in hand. So holding your pen not straight up and down. Of course, you never want to do this because you want to always be able to have access to the side of the pen where you'll see your heavy strokes. 45-degree angle and holding it in the middle of your barrel. Here in the center. is going to help you with your strokes. So that's 2 and 4. And then always remember to lift your pen just before the bottom. So anytime you have an underturn, let me see, you want to lift around, maybe that pen is too light. Sorry if that's too light. Let me do this one. You want to lift right before the bottom. So in this area. So lift, light pressure, back up. Because if you don't and you continue with too much pressure, you end up with what we call a soggy bottom, and you don't want that. You want it to be more either transitioning, well, that's pretty much what you want it to be. The point, the very transition tip of the point. If you don't, you won't get that here. So full pressure, start releasing right about there, but continue and then go back up. I guess same thing goes for an oval. So I start lifting right about there. Okay. So there are just some super basics that if you have any trouble and can't figure out why your thick and thin are not looking the way you want them to, try those different ways, holding it in the middle of the barrel. And again, practice will definitely help with that. So here we have our foligraphy. Okay, let me, with foligraphy, I like to always teach foligraphy because it's very good to help in the beginning, at the beginning stages, understanding where the thick and thin go. It's also good to know in case you do not have a flexible pen. So for this section, I'm going to actually use a monoline pen, which is non-flexible. And if you're ever doing a project or whatever you're doing and the pen that you have at the moment or for a specific project, for example, like if you're doing wood art with a Sharpie oil pen, well, the Sharpie oil pens don't even exist in a flexible tip. So at that point would be good to know foligraphy. It's also good just to write your quotes with an open space and not actually filling them in. So I'm going to show you both ways. And then just adding some flourishing doodles. And I just kind of feel it goes hand in hand with learning basic calligraphy. It's a nice technique to learn in the beginning. So let me write it down here. Okay, so anytime you're going to do foligraphy, you always want to keep your strokes in mind. And you want to leave enough space to write your downstroke. So let's do entrance stroke, ascending loop. So see, that's what I mean, leaving enough space so I could come back and write a downstroke. And here. And then depending on what side has the most space, that's where you would write your downstroke, draw your downstroke. So there's not a specific rule if it goes on the left or the right. It's all about balance. And then again, in a situation where you just want to create, the look of calligraphy and you don't have a flexible pen, you fill it in. Or you want to leave it open and add some color. You could get really creative and do this on a watercolor page and add some watercoloring, add doodle and watercoloring. There was another class I taught where you can do a ombre or gradient effect and make a darker shade here on the outside and then make it light on the inside. You could get really creative with that open space. So that is just the basics with foligraphy. What do we have next? Any questions on page 4 before we move on? Okay. So when I started, I already mentioned this a couple of times, rows and rows of basic strokes. One thing I kind of did on my own, I think I got a couple of ideas from Pinterest, but what I did was fill up practically a half a notebook of alphabet drills. It's combining 2 letters with each other. So, or for example, just starting with the letter A. Let me start up here. So like I call this the alphabet drill. Start with AA. And then move on to AB. So the first letter is going to stay the same. And the second letter is going to continue through the alphabet. So in my book, what I actually did was continued. I think what I did was split my page in half. And this is why I called it drills, because I didn't just practice the AA once, I continued on. So let's just continue with the B. I filled up this whole section. And of course, just depending on your alphabet and how much you space it out, every letter is going to have a different amount on the line. But I continued and just filled in the space until I got to the line. And then once I crossed over the line, that's when I changed alphabet. So this is just a fun way to continue to practice your alphabet. As I'm writing here, I also want to mention that I highly recommend practicing any drills, any rows, anything you do. If you're just doing a whole entire row of just one single letter, and maybe you can do that, connecting them and just do A, but having them touch so you can practice connecting. I always want you to practice your entrance stroke and your exit strokes, no matter what you're doing. Always, always teach yourself entrance and exit. And the reason I recommend that is so it guarantees enough space in between your next letter. Yeah, enough spacing in between every letter, and not also sets you up for the next letter. You can also do it with different, of course, different pens, writing utensils. So let's see, let's do D. Let's do a big letter. See, here's my exit stroke, and it just sets me up for my next letter. Exit stroke. Always doing my exit strokes, no matter what. And like I said, it falls into muscle memory, and now I do it without hesitation, you know. What else was I gonna say? Yeah, so spacing. Another way, another cool way to teach yourself the pressures of thick and thin. A problem I had in the beginning was not applying enough pressure to my strokes. So I would go here and then just barely give my downstrokes, you know, just holding back, not giving it its full pressure where I can do. These flexible pens, that's very little effort, and that's the right amount of effort, because I personally want to see a dramatic difference between the thick and the thin. These pens are made for full force. They're flexible for a reason. They will not break. These, you know, like I said, the felt tips and these Crayolas hold up pretty well against pressure. Another way to teach yourself that skill, because it does take skill, your hand is going to hurt and you will have cramps when you're doing these drills. Try picking up a pencil, and every upstroke is going to be a light pencil mark, and every downstroke you're going to apply pressure, it's going to be darker. So upstrokes are going to be a lighter marking, and downstrokes will be a darker marking. So letter A, up, light, reverse oval, full pressure. So I'm forcing myself to make my downstrokes look extremely darker than my upstrokes. And when I'm doing that, I'm applying extreme amount of pressure. Also, using, with this little pencil technique, using a pencil that is not very sharp is key. You want to use a little, a pencil that has more of a dulled tip. So do about a full row of a pencil marking, pencil technique, and then switch right over to a brush pen, and you're gonna feel that muscle working and getting that thick and thin like you want. You can also do continuing on into basic drills. Do a full row of just faux calligraphy. So say for instance, I went through the whole alphabet. I went to A all the way to AZ. Filled up a whole entire page. I think it takes, I want to say it takes about a good three to 5 pages if you do it this way. A, B, A, C, all the way to AZ. Anywhere from 3 to 5 pages. I can't remember, but that's why I said I filled up about half a notebook. So like I said, the first letter stays the same. Go all the way through the alphabet. The second letter is what changes. And then you move on. So when you move on, I'm going to use foligraphy in this example, but you would go on to the letter B. So now my first letter changes to B. Starts with A again. And I believe this will take forever, but like I said, maybe you can change the type of pen you're writing with for each letter. B. Oh, yeah. Also, when I was doing my drills like this, every time I would, let me see, let me finish this BD, because I'm going to switch back over to brush pen, a lot easier. Every time I would fill up a whole entire row, so B, D, A, B, D, E, let's do B, E. So I would do B, E, and then I would change, if there was something I didn't like, my goal wasn't to make them look identical. Well, maybe I can try making my entrance stroke a little bit more straight and give my B a little loop. No, I don't like the way that looks. Let me go back to the first way I did it with adding a loop here. You know, so that's what I'm saying, getting creative. But what I did know in the beginning, it's good. You're gonna see your flaws, and then that's how you can use a whole entire section to work on those flaws. Like, so another example, you have your B here, but I didn't do my exit stroke. Well, go back, put my exit stroke, but I want to be sure that on my next drill, practice my exit stroke. Just little things like that, you know, use that section wisely and just continue to practice and practice and practice. So then say we finished B, go on to C. Not every pen works well with any paper. As you work with different pens, you're going to notice they write differently. Obviously, because of the type of ink that's in them. One thing you also want to keep in mind when working with brush pens, to use soft paper, smooth paper. So tracing paper, extremely smooth. Marker paper, extremely smooth. We have HP premium paper. So if you're going to print anything from the internet, like guidelines or even this packet that I have, printing it on HP premium paper to help your pens from not fraying as fast. Rhodia is another good brand. Every Rhodia packet has smooth paper. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind. Smooth. The smoother the paper, the longer your brush pens will last. Another
that's a helpful tip. That's a helpful tip.
Yep. For sure. We put all this money into the brush pens. We want them to last. What else? Oh, I was gonna also show, let me see, a little way to do in this practice subject, maybe creating your own guidelines. I mean, not guidelines, I'm sorry, your own guide sheets. Obviously, since I teach calligraphy, I had to come up with my own guidelines, and that also helped me in the beginning, in the earlier years, get better at this technique, because I was having to come up with different guides, teaching guides. They're actually put away, but doing that, maybe act as if you're a teacher and come up with these different ways and create your whole entire alphabet, is another way to teach yourself. And what I mean is, an example of one would be, so let's see, let me just draw it out. Teaching yourself the entrance and exit strokes. So A, and I guess it's more of a study guide. I know I created one like this where, so what I did here, hope y'all could see that. Let me get a bigger pen. I'm sorry. Okay. One more time. We have your entrance, your oval, underturn. So the dot represents the start, and then the arrows represent end. So I thought that this would be some helpful information. What if you challenge yourself and create the whole entire alphabet using this little drill here? And that will definitely teach you the alphabet breakdown. So here's another example. So like the letter M. You don't have to be a teacher to do all these little fun, cool little techniques that are out there. Study guides. Create your own study guide. And then just, like I said, going, and then maybe, so if there was a page like that, connecting them right after. And then, so I have the 3 strokes with my entrance mark, my start mark, my end mark, and then put them together. Creates the letter M. Let's see, what's another one? Let's do, the F. The F is actually, that's one I didn't talk about. Right here. So with the F, yes, these are all the strokes that go into it. But when you actually write it in a word, I would suggest writing it as a single stroke. So just thought I'd share that with you.
Do you have any favorite words or series of letters that you like to write?
Not specifically. So like maybe like tricky combinations, something like that?
Yeah. So I don't know. It's for me, I like the double L. I don't know. That's kind of fun because I guess it's easy. I like doing the R.
Yeah, and instead of writing it by itself, you're saying maybe doing a combination.
Right. Or either a series of letters that actually spell something.
Oh, okay. Yeah, not honestly, I don't have any favorites. And quite honestly, to answer your question, I think creating this combats all those combinations. So I obviously there's going to be some crazy combinations, but one thing I'm glad you're saying it, that I did do. So like you said, let's say RR, that's crazy, right? We're going to come across the double R's. So what I would do, let me get a blank here. So I would, oh wow, that was tricky. I want to practice that specific, combination, but I ran out of room. So I would go off and grab another piece of paper and continue to write that. If that makes sense. Like studying that hard one even more. I think that would be the best way to do it, kind of putting it, whatever you come across, and then combining them. Are there any words you want me to write out right now? Maybe we can write a few fun words before we move on to the project.
No, not really. It's up to you, but I was just curious. Because I'm sure some words, I know the drills have a lot to do with it, but I'm sure some words are easier to make them flow better than others, I would suspect.
Yeah. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, let me see. I'm looking on my Pinterest board to see. I guess that's actually a really good topic where we can just use one of our classes and just focus on tricky combinations and see, those are better. Working on a tricky combination that we are going to see in a letter, is in a word. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Yeah, sort of. That's correct.
Like specifically, yeah, I would like to put something together like that. That would be good. Maybe just a whole worksheet of common, tricky. Let me put that common.
Like, I'm going to give an example. Like for me, when I'm practicing the double C, it looks bad. Like if I'm doing double C next to each other.
Yeah.
And it's something about, I don't know, it's something about the C. Like, for example, for some reason, I can really do the B well. I can really do the K pretty well. This is just my opinion of what I see. When it comes to like even the capital C, and you would think it would be the reverse, but
Yeah.
for some reason I don't know.
So you're just saying the C in period is hard, or the double C is what's the hard part?
Both.
Okay. Okay. So then you have an issue with just that letter specifically.
Mainly, yes.
Yeah.
Mainly.
Like I said, back then M and N were mine. Honestly, I'm gonna say it again, rows and rows of practice, you know, just if you have to just force yourself to just continue to write the letter C. Okay, so looking at this, I would recommend, so if you could print or get this notebook, get something with a grid. Do you see this pink color? Does it show up, the pink?
Yes.
Okay. So another way to practice, and I just thought of it right now because when these grids are nice because they can, this for this exact reason. I know when I was teaching myself the letters, I mean the numbers, something like this was helpful. But what you want to do is create bumpers and keep your letter within the same area, within that guide. So to me, this is just to begin. So I'm using 4 squares here. I'm always gonna start on the top right square. I'm gonna go backwards, full pressure, release before the bottom, and I'm gonna end. Is this small? Should I do it bigger? I kind of feel.
No, it's a good size.
Okay.
But for me, what I notice is like using my entrance stroke
Okay.
into the C. I guess, like you said, it's just practice. And you see how like your first set of C's, like you go, like it almost looks like the last C is bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I see why you're using the squares.
Right, to practice, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So without the bumpers, as I was writing this, this idea came into my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just keeping, or so what if, well, that's kind of a big C. Well, how about we use 1.5 squares to create the letter C? You know, whatever works for you to give it more of a uniform look. Does that make sense? So it's not so rounded, but regardless, whatever works, just create bumpers, okay? But speaking on double letters, another thing, I guess that's what it is. It's a thing. You don't have to do it. It's part of creating your own style. If you ever have, for example, a double F, so let's just write it. Let's write coffee. So I would do my F regular here, but then I'd get creative and leave the loop out of the top one. W, right? The letter, what else gets funky? Okay, the letter P. I don't know what's a double P. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but let's see. We have a P here. Let's go back here. We have our basic letter P, but my word calls for a second P. I'm gonna loop it across. Or don't even give it a loop. And what this does it draws a distraction because exactly what you said, it is hard to create such an identical letter P.
Could you pull the paper down a little bit?
Okay. Thank you. It's pretty much impossible. You can be really good at this, and it's going to take you several tries to get a perfect combination. So what, again, this little thing that has been created out of this calligraphy is every time there's a double letter, they switch it up so that it distracts our eyes and doesn't look the same. So let me do the PP again. See, we do a single, add a loop here, but then do a basic here. So literally just make it completely different. I know, you know, that it's just on the same subject. I know it has nothing to do with the C, because how much can you change a letter C? But you get what I mean with any double combination.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm sure you could add bounce to it, whatever. What else? Like Q's. Q's another one. Obviously just backwards. But yeah, that's another way to do doubles. Okay, so do we have any questions before we move on? All right, let's work on our monthly worksheet. Oh, that was. I guess I didn't grab it, pull it out of the pile. Give me 1 second. There it is. We're going to be working on our letter K and the word February. I hope I was able to give some more basic knowledge to everybody who's been joining my class for the last few months. Trying to get creative here. Okay, so I'm going to use tracing paper so we could do it again next week. I apologize if this is more complicated, but again, it's practice. Preserve the sheet and practice writing all this different ways. Okay. So up top, we have our copper plate letter K. Uppercase copper plate letter K. Has 3 strokes. Starts with a, I would say, an extended compound curve. So the entrance is more extended and then goes into a regular compound curve. Our second stroke is our universal line of beauty. Starts very light, drops down into full pressure, and then releases before the bottom and exits with light pressure. Letter K, a smaller universal line of beauty with a little loop, down into an underhand compound curve, a half compound curve, I would say. So let's practice those 3 strokes again. Entrance stroke is expanded, compound curve, universal line of beauty. Kind of looks like a large S. Starts with light pressure, very tip of my pen. Kind of reminds me of a roller coaster. You want to just, you know, you're at the top of the roller coaster and you're going, and then it just drops straight down into an angle with full pressure. And then you want to release right before the bottom with a little exit. Kind of the same concept, but it's going to be shorter. Add a loop and then exit with the little compound curve. This K is really hard to do. You can see me struggling here, struggling with my own tracing paper. See here, I put a little hook on the top. I actually don't want that. So that's why, you know, with this top, you kind of want to just drop your pen and go for it, you know, just drop it and then go for it, you know, without having to actually hook it. Let's try that one more time. See, the K's, they're so complicated. This is why I can't teach uppercase, because uppercase takes its whole entire class. And speaking of, next week, I'm actually going to be teaching basics of copperplate. So that's one class that we've all been wanting for a really long time. We're going to be using a dip pen. So if you have a dip pen and ink, have that available. We're going to be doing that again next week.
Is there an alternative?
For a dip pen?
Correct.
I want to say there's fountain pen. If you look up fountain pen, it's the same thing. And you don't have to dip and clean and wipe.
Oh, it just rolls out.
It just rolls out, but it has the tip like this. Fountain pen. Those are cool. But again, you know, for those of you that are going to join next week, you do not have to do class with the dip pen. It's just another writing tool that I'm going to highlight. But just like I'm doing here, this is the first row is copperplate, but I am doing it with a brush pen. So just keep that in mind. Like I said, I'm going to be working with the dip pen. And then I also want to just go over all the basic strokes of copperplate, just how the lowercase has basic strokes, uppercase copperplate has their own set of strokes to practice. So that's going to be a fun class next week. Something I've never done before. Okay. Moving on to the lowercase letter K. Let me go backwards. It has 3 strokes: entrance, ascending, and the letter K. A weird stroke, an unnamed stroke. And then for the entrance and ascending loop can actually be combined. Oh, I don't know what I was doing there. I thought I was doing H. And again, this is my type of letter K. The more traditional would be adding a loop to the top of the K. Pretty much looks like a letter R. Oh, there we go. Okay, see, I don't do that way often, but look how this last one had more of a smaller loop. So another way another trick to doing that, instead of starting right here in the middle and just adding the loop right off the stem, actually follow it up from the bottom. Trace the downstroke up and then add the loop. Does that make sense? So it's, instead of starting right off the stem, you want to start from the bottom. For some reason, it gives it a different flow. Like you see it kind of flower out from that intersection. Next, we have a, I would say, bounce, letter K. Actually, let's bounce the bottom. So let's do an upper entrance stroke. And then drop the downstroke, the compound curve at the end. Give it more of a bounce look. So flow in the entrance stroke, give it a loop at the top, and drop the compound curve with the exit stroke. Let's not do a loop, let's do a straight line. Drop it down. Oh yeah, see, that looks funny. I don't like that. I think that's why I gave it a loop, because I had enough room. So bounce letter K there. I'm going to switch over to a monoline pen. So here in the calligraphy line with the letter K, I'm going to leave, I don't want any cross strokes on my open spaces. So for the uppercase letter K, I'm actually going to do, guess what it is? It's an open letter J. I guess that's the best way to describe it. So the entrance stroke is a little swirl. I'm going to pause at the top, drop down, and give it a loop up. Then I'm going to go right back and give it a second downstroke on the back side. The letter K, very similar to the top copper plate. Down at an angle, then a compound curve out. And then with this top one, you're going to trace over the first mark you did, and then kind of open it up as you go down the stem. Let me do that one more time. Okay, so with the lowercase letter K, the entrance stroke is going to be drawn after the first, let's call it the ascending loop. I have the ascending loop here, draw my second line, then come back and do my entrance stroke. Second stroke on the letter K. Let me do it without the loop. Okay. Let's write the word Valentine's Day next. as you practice your words more, you're gonna notice, so for example, this letter E and N, as experienced as I am, you can do the E without lifting and transition right into overturn to set up the letter N. And sometimes you want to do that because you want to avoid a disconnect in this area. So between the letter E and then trying to line up that very thin upstroke is kind of hard. So over time, you're going to notice you can actually cheat and combine double strokes to avoid any disconnect. Okay, so next we have the word February broken down. So it's broken down into exactly how I wrote it here. So you're going to see some double combinations here as I was explaining there. So letter F, easier drawn as a single stroke. E, ascending loop, oval. Letter R as a single stroke, underturn, underturn, a reverse oval, underturn into an R with an exit stroke. So this is a tricky one. And then this, so see, this falls into what I was just explaining up here, the E and the N. But here I'm gonna have to just figure out that disconnect because my thick and thin, I can continue to write all three strokes together, but by the time I get to this third stroke, it's not going to look as spaced out or as, you know, nice as I would like it to if I don't lift my pen. So every word, every letter, every stroke, every person is different. So let's put those together. The word February. Okay. Next, February written in calligraphy. Main stroke, back up and add the loop right at the beginning and stop before crossing over. Slightly overlap and add the second line there. This top loop, this top swirl on the top of the F, start on the bottom, so the loop on the left side, and cross it over and give it a little swirl, a sideways letter S. See, to me, this is all drawing. Everything about calligraphy is drawing, even when it comes to calligraphy. Drawing shapes every which way. Remember to keep enough spacing to add your second stroke, your second line for the downstrokes. Okay. Next, we have a little bit of bounce February. Quick lesson, February. I mean, every time you do, every time I do it, which I recommend you do, if you're gonna do anything with flourishes or with bounce, write it out in the basic format with the pencil, and then go back and figure out where you want to add your bounce or add your flourish, because with bounce and flourish, it's all about balance. And if you start with the basic pencil, you can erase and sketch out exactly where you want your balanced bounce or your balanced flourish. Next, we have February written in extended form. And all you're doing is expanding the entrance strokes and the exit strokes. Remember to always go slow and controlled. Okay, and then here with the flourished February, this is more of a copper plate letter F. And then, so with the letter B, you're gonna work on the flourish first so that it can flow into the downstroke. So it goes backwards, loop it, cross over, and then goes into your basic downstroke. The letter R just loops cross to the right, crosses over everything, and then swirl at the bottom. Add a little bounce to some of the letters. And the Y. Downstroke. Like a little pretzel twist. Have any questions on this one before we move on to our little quote of the night? So this is the quote we're going to be doing. trying to figure out. So I'm gonna get a ruler. This is the way I like to do it to make sure I'm lined up correctly. Try. Okay. I'm gonna make markings at every 1 inch, starting at 1 inch, and then at 2 inches, and then I'm gonna go at 1/2 inch. So 1 inch, 1/2 inch, 1 inch. 1 inch, half, 1, half, 1, half, 1, half. And I'm lining my ruler up at the where the color is, not at the edge of my paper. And then connecting each side. I made markings on each side and then connecting the dots. Or you can always freehand this however you like to do it. But I personally like to see the lines just straight, the word straight as possible. Of course, it's not always perfect. That's the beauty of hand lettering. Okay. Let me see. One. I think I did it wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh no. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So the reason I did a 1/2 inch, well, what I did was leave a 1 inch gap at the top, and then I started counting at 1, 2, 2.5. Okay. So with any quote you do, I always recommend, like I said, just making some quick guidelines, and then sketching out your quote, just so that when you write down on marker, it's going to come out as centered as you'd like it. So our quote says, wake up, and the next 3 lines, B is going to be all capital letters. So be kind. Be amazing. doing that wrong. I want to fill in the whole gap. And be grateful. Repeat. Okay. Then today I'm going to be using this metallic Kuretake brush pen. The pencil, I just try to use it as a guide, but it sometimes doesn't come out exactly lined up, but I know more or less where I'm going. Be amazing. And be grateful. Oh, one thing also I like to mention is if you're not happy with the thickness, always feel free to go back and add a second line and make it as thick as you prefer. Looks like I'm running out of ink here. This is your drawing, so you can always go back and just add a second line and just fix it to your liking. These are really old markers. And then I'm not going to erase everything now, but I would go back and erase, still kind of wet, but erase all my pencil markings. And these markers are pretty good and will hold up. See that? Just erasing the first part of it. It won't smear. I highly recommend getting some, this would be considered graph pencil, drafting pencils. So either graph or drafting pencils, sketch pencils, instead of using your regular number 2 pencils, because these are a lot easier to erase. So looking into getting those along with having them part of your calligraphy set would be good. Highly recommended. Okay, so just briefly going over the last few pages of the worksheet. You could finish up your quote and just, I'm just going to talk over it. These last 3, I really don't have any projects for them. They're just more of a informational pages. When learning your, starting your calligraphy journey, you're going to hear guidelines, and then you're going to hear the word ascender. Oh yeah. You're going to hear ascender, waistline, baseline, and descender. Anything between the waistline and the baseline is considered the X height, and that's where all our base words are formed. It's not mandatory to memorize all these, but this is just some good information when it comes to guidelines and understanding what line each line is named. So understanding the name. So yeah, basically everything in between those two everything will always fall in the X height. And like the letter T, the letter F, anything with the ascending loop, of course, touches the ascender line, and anything with the descender touches the all the way down to the descender line. Different guidelines that you're going to come across or that you can definitely work with. I like to use this elementary 2-lined paper. I use it a lot in my worksheet just so that having this ascender line, X height, waistline, like throw out that all that out the window. Start off with your basic elementary 2 rows and just stick with the basics. And then once you advance, you can figure out, okay, where do I go next? But always recommend starting there. Moving on to graph paper. So that's the notebook that I have here. So I like how this is darker in the notebook, but in the second one would be considered graph paper, actually slanted graph paper. You can use it however, but the slant is obviously there so you can slant your letters. If not, since this is distorted, you can just use it just like regular graph paper. They have larger graph paper, and obviously for any of this, they have it large. This is a larger slanted graph paper for our larger brush pens. You can create guidelines yourself by using regular line paper. If you have a small brush, you're gonna use one X height. I'm sorry, 1 line for each area. So your X height would be 1 line long, ascender 1 line up, descender 1 line down. But if you go, the bigger your brush pen, the more lines you're going to use. So for a medium size and you want to use 2 rows, you got to make sure your ascender hits 2 rows up and your descender hits 2 rows down. Same thing for 3 up, 3 down. The bigger the brush pen, the more lines, so that you can see the thick and thin better. And then they have dot paper. I started off with dot paper. I have a Rhodia dot grid, and then you can just use a dot grid as vision and a vision guideline, or physically get a ruler and write. And same rule goes for the line paper. You're going to use 1 row of dots, 1 row up, 1 row down, or all the way to 3. 3 rows of dots, 3 up and 3 down. Just some tips to help you practice. when you sit down and practice, you want to always keep your size, be consistent with the sizes. And to help with that, I suggest always practicing the entrance and exit strokes. That helps with size of letters. Choose an angle. So either you're going to go at a slant or you're going to go up and down. You want to stick with that, keep it uniformed. The space between that goes into practicing your entrance and exit strokes. Using guidelines or creating some with a ruler and paper will help you keep your formation. Lift your pen after every stroke. I mentioned that. There we have it, entrance and exit strokes. Use wrist and arm and shoulder movement. If you're having trouble, put your whole arm into it. Rows and rows of basics, can't stress that enough. Use different writing tools. I talked about that on the alphabet drills. And practice, keep in mind, practice helps with muscle memory, which eventually helps with shakiness. Here's a list of recommended supplies. All the supplies are listed by their name. So if you search it in Google or Amazon, they should come up with the names we listed here. Paper, brush pens. I wrote small or large on them. Dip pen, watercolor. They have watercolor pens, or if you're gonna do a watercolor pen, using a small paintbrush would be fun. Calligraphy. And then just some other supplies and brands that you can use. Like Crayola and Sharpie, they even have their own set of brush pens, flexible tips. And then this is just a little takeaway. We don't always do our uppercases, but if you're gonna work on a project, grab your page 8 and see how to do your uppercase letters. That is it for our beginning calligraphy.